Hello, welcome listeners to another episode of Listen, Learn, and Love, hosted by Richard Ostler. Our guest on today's podcast, joining me, as you can see, for those of you who are watching video or also on our audio platforms, Seth Bott. Welcome to the podcast, Seth.
Thank you, Richard.
Really glad to have Seth on the podcast. I reached out to him. He's been somebody I've been Facebook friends with for a long time, and I knew he's the GOAT of all things music, and been following that, and he's gay and he's in a same-sex partnership, but he's often performing at LDS venues. And I just thought, here's a pretty thoughtful guy that's navigating being gay, LDS, being immensely talented with his skills, and also in a same-sex relationship. So I asked him if he'd come on the show and share his story, and here we are. He'll give an introduction, but he has a PhD in music art, so he's actually Dr. Seth Bott. He is the director of music and some other things that he'll mention at St. Wait, which one? Tell me the church.
St. James.
And tell us what you do at St. James.
Okay. So I'm the director of music and organist and choir master at St. James Episcopal Church. So I rehearse the choir every Wednesday night, and then Sunday mornings I have two services I play the organ for. The first service is a more contemplative service. The second service is the big, full, bells and whistles with the choir, and I have instrumentalists come in periodically. But it's a very high church, Anglican church, and so everything music I plan the hymns to follow the readings of the day and all the music. So, and then I also play for weddings and funerals there.
Thanks for all you do at St. James. That's just great. And Seth will talk about, he often performs in LDS venues. He's an organist at Education Week at BYU in a couple weeks, about the time this podcast is released. And he's just going to share his story of growing up, figuring out his sexual orientation. He's got a really tender story of his father that he shared briefly with me before we recorded, that just really moved my heart. And just terrific man in his late 30s, doing a remarkable job navigating all the different spaces he's a part of and bringing joy and community and compassion and healing everywhere he goes. So we said a prayer. We hope this is helpful for you, especially if you're a younger, queer person. Seth's been on this road for a long time, and if you're an ally or a parent, just perhaps Seth's story will help you better support LGBTQ folk in your life. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Seth.
Thank you. Thanks, Richard, and especially thank you for having me on this podcast. Something that's been a challenge for me in my life is trying to reconcile my faith that I was raised with, which was LDS, of course, and also my sexuality. And I've tried very hard. So I hope my story helps people. I do want to mention, though, that I am respectful for people who are in same-sex relationships, obviously, because I am in one, but also those who in the church feel like they need to they're in a mixed-oriented marriage, or if they're celibate and single. My heart supports everyone in this walk, and it's very important to me that we all find that happiness and that we don't judge somebody else for maybe following a different path. Because I really hope that we are all doing the thing that we think is the best for us. So, I'll just kind of tell my story, Richard, and maybe my background and how I got to where I am today. Like I said, like you said, Richard, grew up in Castle Dell, and Utah is where I'm from, but I'm currently a professional musician in Salt Lake City. Like I said, I'm director of music and organist at an Episcopal Church, but I also have a large organ studio of about 50 organ students that I teach actually around the country. About 40 of them are local here in Utah, and about 10 of them I teach virtually that live in other states. And then I do a lot of organ recitals, freelance organ recitals as a solo recitalist, and I also accompany a lot of orchestras and choirs around the country, but predominantly here in Utah. I usually travel once or twice a year doing that somewhere in the country. And like you said, I play regularly on Temple Square in the Tabernacle for outside choirs, or the Tabernacle Organist invited me to do one of the virtuoso organ recital concerts 2 years ago in 2024. And so anyway, so the church is still a big part of my life. And of my students, there are of my 50 students, I'd say 35 of them are current ward organists or temple organists.
Wow.
So I'm teaching the hymns all the time.
Wow.
I also make them play repertoire, but I'm doing a lot of hymn teaching. So, okay, so my background, I'm from Castledale, Utah, which is a small town in rural Utah. It's very LDS and very conservative. I was raised in a family of 5 kids. I'm the 4th of 5. I have 3 older brothers, so there's 4 boys and then a girl. We were at a very young age, we were all taught, or I don't know if the word forced is the right word, but I don't remember it being an option. We all started piano lessons when we were 7 or 8, and we started studying piano with my great aunt Pearl, so my grandpa Bott's sister. And I kind of liked it at first, but then all of a sudden when I was around 13, the music bug bit me, and I just loved it. And I started practicing the piano a lot. And then I remember watching General Conference at a young age and being obsessed with the organ. And every time I'd see the organ at General Conference, I was mesmerized by it. Why? Because there are 5 keyboards. The organist would play with their feet. And I'm like, that is the coolest thing. That's like the piano on steroids. I want to play that someday is what I thought. And so the organ bug bit me. And I had one goal in life with music. That was to be a tabernacle organist for the tabernacle choir. Now, I think that a lot of Latter-day Saint organists have that goal somewhere in their head, but I really had it in my head, and I was very vocal about it with everybody, that I wanted to be a tabernacle organist. Well, I started organ lessons at age 15 from a local lady named Jennifer, and I studied with her for about 7 or 8 months, and then she felt like I had surpassed her ability, and so she sent me to a music camp in 2002 at BYU. There, I met both of the main organ professors at BYU, but I was taking lessons with one in particular. I told him I was looking for a new organ teacher, and he said, "Do you want to come to BYU and study with me privately?" And I was only 15 years old, and I was like, oh my gosh. And so I called my parents, and my parents were so supportive of me because they saw how dedicated I was. I was kind of a nerd, not going to lie. And I said, I would love to start studying up here if that's at all possible. And my parents made the sacrifices because, of course, that's a financial responsibility. That's, not only with how much lessons costs, but also Castledale is about 2 hours away from BYU's campus. So in one direction. So every other Thursday I started organ lessons at the beginning of my sophomore year of high school, and we would drive 2 hours on a Thursday night right after school, Thursday afternoon after school. I'd take an hour-long organ lesson, would grab like a burger or something on the way home, and then would drive home. So my mom and I did that every other Thursday. Mostly it was my mom and me, but sometimes my dad would take me. And again, the goal was to be, a tabernacle organist eventually, because tabernacle organists have to have a doctorate degree. They require a master's degree, but they prefer a doctorate degree in performance. And that's what my degree is in, a doctorate of musical arts with an emphasis in organ performance and pedagogy, which is teaching. So that was my goal. So in high school, and I actually feel a little bit guilty about this. Not guilty, but I guess the word is guilty. I had a fantastic high school time. I was student body president. I was always in a class officer and student council, and I was never bullied. I never felt like I didn't fit in. I always had a lot of friends and fit in. And the reason why I say it that way is because that I feel guilty is because I know there are a lot of people that had an awful time in high school with bullying that were part of the LGBTQ plus community. And my heart really, really hurts for people like that have had that struggle in their life. And, I never had that. And I always had girlfriends, but there was always something missing with that. And I remember my mom said to me that once I hit puberty, that I would start to notice that girls, might be different. I might be attracted to them. I start noticing their body features and all that stuff. And that never happened to me, even though I hit puberty and I did notice girls. I started noticing men. I started noticing like if they were fit or if they had muscles. And I just felt like I got along great with guys. And even though I get along fine with women, but I just noticed I got along fantastic with men. Now, this is where it kind of got complicated. So I graduated high school in 2005, and then I got into BYU as an organ major. And I did 1 year at BYU before I went on my mission to California, Ventura mission. And so I moved up to Provo and started studying organ as a music major full time. And I was worthy. I prepared and I was interviewed by my bishop and my stake president to go on a mission. And I knew deep down inside that I had same-sex attraction, but I never admitted to anybody that ever. And at that time. And I remember thinking, I am never going to tell a soul this, because first of all, I thought I was unworthy to go on a mission just for the fact that I had same-sex attraction. Because the church at that time did not really talk about this. It was very quiet. And I didn't dare share it with my family. I didn't dare share it with any friends. I definitely didn't want to share it with the bishop, because I actually will share this story. I remember right when I started my freshman year of college, my uncles and my dad actually told me this, that my grandpa Bott had a goal, and that was that all of his sons and grandsons would serve missions. And at that time, my freshman year of college, all of my dad and all of his siblings had served a mission, and all of my siblings, my brothers, and all of my male cousins had served missions, and I was the last one. And so even though I always wanted to serve a mission, I had that pressure going into it. And they said, you're the last one to fulfill Grandpa Bott or our dad's goal for his sons and grandsons. And of course I wanted to go. However, that was an additional pressure. So I'm definitely not going to share with anybody that I'm gay. I'm not going to let anything potentially keep me from going in the mission field. Well, I got called on my mission. And I loved my mission so much. And I served from May of 2006 to the beginning of June 2008. And I had a special bond with my mission president the whole time I was there. And I actually, the last 8 months of my mission, served as one of his assistants. And I got to go out on exchanges with the other zone leaders. And I got to actually, something that was very special to me is the last transfer I was on my mission, I was in a threesome companionship because two of us that were assistants, we were going home at the same time and we had to train a new assistant. And so during that time, the other two missionaries would go out on exchanges, and the mission president asked me if I would go with him to help train stake leaders and ward leaders around the mission on how to have more effective missionary coordination meetings. And so I got to spend a lot of time with him in the car and just really grew to love that man. But I remember always thinking deep down inside, I hope he never thinks that I am unworthy, because I actually really felt like I was unworthy just because I was gay. Even though I'd never done anything, I just felt like I was unworthy. But while I was serving my mission was when the article that Elder Holland wrote in the Ensign about, it's called Helping Those Who Struggle with Same-Sex Attraction. It was the talk. And David Archuleta actually commented on this in his book that he just released called Devout, that I have read. And he said that that's when he realized as well that the church as a whole didn't view same-sex attraction as a sin. That was news to me. And I remember reading that, and there's a lot of details in there. Of course, the church's stance is, I think still is that it's not a sin to be gay, but to act on it. And so that's what essentially what Elder Holland's, but at least it was a step in the direction that I wasn't unworthy. And now when I look back at my mission and before my mission, I actually was a pretty chaste, worthy guy. And that's something that I wish I had known before I went on my mission that even, and it's partially my fault. I didn't share with anybody, but it was such a deep, dark secret. Now, like I said, I grew up in a very LDS and conservative area, and there were things that I was told by different people that I didn't think gays were maybe very accepted or loved at that time in my life. And I just remember thinking, I don't think I'm going to ever be able to tell anybody that I have these tendencies. So after my mission, I returned to BYU, did my bachelor's and master's degrees in organ performance and pedagogy. And I dated a lot of girls. I had beautiful girlfriends, but there was always something missing. And the older I got, the more intense my same-sex attraction became. Why? Because I saw all my friends getting married. I saw the youngest sibling in my family, my sister, she got married. And I just remember it just being a very, very, very tough time for me, even though I feel guilty saying that because I had a lot of friends. My family was super loving and supportive, but I just yearned for the companionship that I saw in others have. And I understand that some people are fine being alone. Maybe some people aren't, but I really believe the scripture that we hear in the temple and that we also read in the scriptures about man is not meant to be alone. And that might be right for some people, but for me, I crave that companionship. And even though I dated women and tried so hard to make it work, it just wasn't for me. I just didn't feel it. So as I was getting older, it was getting more intense. And then in 2012, in March of 2012, I believe it's March, my sister got married. And I remember my parents saying when I was a kid that their number one desire in life was to have all of their kids in the temple with them. Well, that was the year that happened. My sister received her endowments, and then she and her husband got married in the Manti Temple, and all of us were there. And while that was a very good experience for me, it was also a little triggering. And the reason why is because now another person in my life is getting married. And to be honest, I was receiving a lot of pressure from teachers at college or in my home ward when I'd go home and visit. People would always be like, Seth, why aren't you married yet? What's going on? And, I would always say, well, I just haven't found the right one yet. And it was, you receive that pressure from people. And really deep down inside, it was because I was gay. And none of these relationships came to fruition. I have to share one little side story. One of my girlfriends that I had that was moving in the more serious direction, I remember we broke up and she said something to me and I didn't know what it meant, but I think she knew I was gay. She said, we broke up and I was sad. And she said, Seth, I don't think you could provide me with what I need. And I initially thought, what does that mean? Do you not think I'm going to make money professionally? Do you not think I will give you love and support? Like, what do you think? And she said, and I think someday you will understand. And I was like, what is she saying? And I think and this was 1 year before I came out. So I thought maybe she saw that in me. Anyway, so in 2012, my sister got married and I was, so happy for her, but also yearned to have that companionship. Also, remember, the back of my mind, I have my eye on the tabernacle. I want to be a tabernacle organist. But I also have this deep desire within me to, have somebody in my life. So in 2012, I got to the point, now it's time for me to open up about my sexuality. And I was scared. And the first person I told was my sister. And I remember I was at BYU. I was at my ward in the law building, the J. Reuben Clark Law Building. And at that time, certain things at church were triggering to me, like, because it's a singles ward. All the activities revolve around dating and you meeting your eternal companion. And, and at that time I was on the verge of coming out. I really wanted to share this with somebody, and so I'd get triggered at church easily, even though I was trying so hard not to. And at that time I had just been released as Elders Quorum president, and I was serving as the executive secretary, and thinking I was so unqualified, and thinking that I had so many things going on in my head. So this Sunday, I remember I called my sister and I said, I want to talk to you. And she said, can my husband come with? And I said, absolutely not. I want to talk to you just by yourself. And she said, okay, is everything okay? And I was like emotional. I was crying. I said, I just need to talk to you. And so I drove to American Fork. I picked her up and we went to a park. And I remember we sat down on the grass and I said, I wish I were telling you I had terminal cancer, but what I'm about to tell you is worse than that. And she said, what is going on? What? And I said, I'm gay. And that right there was the first time I'd ever uttered those words out loud. And she started crying and she said, Seth, it doesn't matter. And she said, nothing is worse. Like, why would you say you'd rather die of cancer? Like, and really in hindsight, of course, I love my life. I have a great life. Like, why did I get in such a dark spot there for just a little bit of my life to feel that way? And she hugged me, and it was just a beautiful, beautiful, and all of a sudden I felt some weight off my shoulders. And then I called my oldest brother, who's actually currently serving as a bishop in his ward. He's going to actually be released this Sunday, but he is just a wonderful, wonderful guy. And I came out to him and he was wonderful. And he said, he said, my wife will be totally loving and supportive, my sister-in-law. And so I came out to them first, and I was so scared to come out to my parents. I was just so scared because, I come from a successful family, and just because my parents really emphasized the importance of education. And so in my family, 3 of us have doctorate degrees, and then my other 2 siblings have master's degrees. So all of us have advanced degrees. And I thought my coming out to them, they would be disappointed in me. They'd think, oh, I'm an embarrassment to the family, and I'm going to not succeed as much in life as my other siblings have because they're married. And I think a lot of that narrative was in my head, but I was very scared. And so that would have been the early summer of 2012 that I told my sister and my brother. Well, in August of 2012, I had been asked to play the organ for Education Week at BYU. And so not only did I have to play prelude, postlude, and the hymn, just like we always do for Education Week or BYU devotionals, but they asked me if I would also play an organ solo. And I still remember I played an arrangement of the Spirit of God that was fancy, and they had cameras all around me as I was doing my organ solo. It was kind of a fun time because I had a big watch on, and they told me that the producer came up. He was like, you need to take that watch off. It's blinding the cameraman. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I had to take that watch off, and I did it. But before that Education Week, the night before that performance, my parents came up to Provo because they were going to be attending that Education Week. And we went and had a family home evening gathering in Spanish Fork at a splash pad, so all my young nieces and nephews could play in that. And we all got together, and again, I was in this very insecure, hard time because I was on the verge of coming out, and everything. I was so sensitive to so many things. And I'm there at the splash pad, and we had pizza and we had a great time. We talked and laughed. It was fantastic. But I just remember being so lonely. And when we left that night, I remember watching my mom and dad walk off with holding hands, and then watch my oldest brother and then my next brother go off with their spouses and their families. And then my brother that's right older than me, he lives in Colorado, so I don't think they were there. But I remember my sister and her newly wedded her new husband walking off, and I just was so lonely. I yearned for that. And I got in the car and I was driving back to BYU and I just started bawling and I couldn't stop crying. And even though I had some of my dearest friends I lived with, we were roommates, we're all around the same age, we're all in grad school. None of us had girlfriends at the time. I had no reason to feel lonely, but I also did because I wanted to have that companionship. And I remember I couldn't stop crying, and I went and parked up kind of by the trail to the Y, to hike up to the Y, and I was looking over the valley and I was crying. And finally I'm like, Seth, get it together. You got to go home. You have school tomorrow. You have to play the organ for BYU Education Week. You got to get some sleep. And I remember I stopped by a gas station and I got a popsicle. And I put the cold popsicle under my eye because my eyes were all red and, puffy underneath here from crying so hard. So I got a popsicle and I was trying to take the swelling down so I could go home. And so my roommates didn't know I had been crying. Well, I think I went in and I don't remember talking to anyone that night, but I just went into my bedroom and closed the door. Well, anyway, the next day was that Education Week performance, and my dad texted me and he said, I would like to talk to you if you would please afterwards. Well, I guess my dad, and remember, like I've said, I grew up in a very conservative LDS household. I had heard things about gays growing up that was homophobic, with not, just around the areas. Comments on gays were negative, always. They were never a positive thing. But about 3 months before this time, my dad and my mom were praying before they went to bed. And my dad was praying, and he was praying for all of his kids. They always rotate every other night who prays. I've walked in on them several times praying. So I know they do this every night. And my dad got to my name, and he got really emotional, and he couldn't finish his prayer. And he just ended, and Mom said, "What's wrong with Seth?" And Dad told my mom at that time, "Nothing's wrong with Seth. Everything is wrong with me." And he tried to get closer to the Lord, he said, during that time through, going to the temple and praying and reading the scriptures and everything that he felt he needed to get closer to the Lord. And so now fast forward 3 months or so, when I'm playing the organ again at this Education Week, he wanted to talk to me, and we left BYU, and I remember they had a flat tire or something on the car, and so we had to stop by Big O Tire to get the car, and then we drove to the hotel. So we walked from the Marriott Center to Big O Tire, got the car, and then drove to their hotel room, and he sat me down, and he got emotional, and he said, "Son, I know what you've been having problems with. I know what's going on. I know you're gay." And he said, "I am so sorry that for the things that I have said in the past." And he said, "I can't go back and change what I've said. It's in the past, but I don't feel that way anymore." And he said, "The Lord has brought to my remembrance the things that I have said about gays, and I'm so sorry." And I just remember we're both crying, and he knew I was gay, and I came out to him. And later that day, and I said to Dad, "Have you talked to Mom about this?" And Dad said no. And so I went out with my mom later that day and came out to her, and my parents really listened. Of course, they had to process it. It's, when you come out to somebody, it's not like it's perfect. At least from my experience, it wasn't perfect like that. We've had to work through some stuff. But I totally feel that they have been supportive. And then since then, I came out to my other siblings. I started coming out to a few friends. However, I had to be very careful because I had one more year at BYU. At that time, that was in the middle of my master's degree. And then the next year at BYU, I started dating a little bit, but very discreetly, in fear of getting, kicked out, suspended, because I knew people who had been suspended from BYU for dating men. And so not only was I a student at BYU, but I was a grad student, and I taught classes. I taught a group organ, individual organ. I also taught music in the music theory department. I taught dictation, which is oral skills. I taught that. So had I been suspended ever, it would have been very embarrassing, very public, because all of a sudden I would I wouldn't be able to teach or to be a student anymore. So at the end of my BYU, I started dating a guy. I had a boyfriend for a little period of time, but it didn't work out. And then I met another guy, and he had just graduated from UVU, and we had similar backgrounds, both returned missionaries, both, gay and wanting to maybe date. And we met, and he and I became partners, and he wasn't out. I was only out to a few people, but then we moved together to Kansas, where I did my doctorate degree at the University of Kansas. And he came with me, and for a long time he wasn't out. We were just roommates, and we had a makeshift guest bedroom that was supposedly my room, and this was his room. But that was a total show, because he wasn't out to anybody, and I was only out to a few people. And to be honest, the way I came out was I have same-sex attraction. I didn't come out and say I have same-sex attraction. Oh, and here's my boyfriend. I came out, I think something I've noticed is that people usually come out in phases. They usually say I have same-sex attraction or that I'm bisexual. And I actually did say I was bisexual initially, but then I knew I wasn't. I knew I was totally gay. I was into men, and that it was just a process getting there. So when I moved to Kansas, I was still active in the church, and I would go. Sacrament meeting happened because I had a church job. It said, usually concert organists work for other religions because we're paid to do that. They hire professional organists. And so I worked for a Methodist church, and that happened at the same time sacrament meeting. So I'd take the sacrament, and then I'd go to work, and then I'd come back, and it'd usually be in the middle of the second hour. Anyway, I did that for a little bit, and then I just slowly stopped going because my partner wasn't active at all in the church. So we were in Kansas for years, and then in 2019, I moved back. My partner had already moved back to Utah, but I joined him about a year later back here in Utah. And I was not active in the church. However, even though there are triggers for me, things I don't necessarily believe in or agree with in the church, I try so hard to be respectful, because the people who in my life, that some of the most important people, are 100% active in the church. My parents, some of my siblings, some of my friends. It's just very important that I was respectful with the church. So I still wanted to give back to the church. I didn't want to go to the temple. I didn't want to perform ordinances. I didn't want to do anything like that. I wasn't going to church. I wasn't paying my tithing. I was totally inactive. However, I still felt like I could give back musically. And so I used to play on Temple Square for the noon recitals. I was a guest recitalist for the noon recitals for 8 or 9 years. And then I taught the annual BYU organ workshop. However, both of those require temple recommends. And they really were, I think the BYU initially, it was an ecclesiastical endorsement, which is different than a temple recommend. But my bishop would just sign off on it and let me do it, because he knew me, he trusted me. He knew that he knew I was getting my doctorate degree and that I could teach organ classes for that week at BYU to students. And then Temple Square, I just flew under the radar because I didn't have a temple recommend. And then in 2019, that unfortunately had to come to a stop because they started enforcing the temple recommend policy, which was really hard for me. However, the people who know me at both of these places, Temple Square and at BYU, have come up with other routes and other ways that I can teach and or perform on Temple Square. That's why I still play on Temple Square for other choirs. I can't do the noon recital because that requires a temple recommend, but the Tabernacle Organists have come up with other recital series that have outside organists come in and perform on one of the world's best pipe organs. And then BYU as the organ program at BYU has come up with other ways that I can still teach outside of the scope of things on campus. So something that was hard for me is that even though I had that goal to be a tabernacle organist, when I came to grips came to terms with my sexuality and my desire to have a relationship, I knew that that wasn't going to happen. And it was really tough for me to step away from that. But I thought, I still love organ. I still love music. I still love the hymns. How can I still do this? And I've been able to make a great living in Salt Lake, teaching and performing and everything. And I'm so grateful for that. And I'm so grateful that the musical people in the church that still give me opportunities to perform and to teach. And they make me feel like I'm a colleague and an equal to them. I can honestly say that. I talk with the Tabernacle Organist frequently, and they are the best, just wonderful people that live their religion. And they make me feel, again, like I'm an equal. And I so appreciate that. And then now to my current partner, I have to mention him. He and I met. So the guy that I was with in Kansas, we were together 11 years and we broke up a few years ago. And it was very, very hot, very tough. As a matter of fact, I don't know if I've ever grieved like that in my life. I had to get a therapist and I went to therapy every week, and it was tough. When you're with someone for 11 years and you've lived together for 10 of those years or 10 and a half of those years, it's like a divorce. And it was just very, very tough. And then I met Michael, who's my current partner. We met in October of 2024, so it's just shy of 2 years. And he and I were raised very differently. Me in a big LDS family, him in a very small non-religious family. Me in a small town in rural Utah, he in Los Angeles, California. Me in a conservative household, him in a very liberal household. And guess what? We come together, we have so many differences, but the things that matter, we get along so well, we communicate well. We have different backgrounds, but we communicate so well, we compromise for each other. I've never been happier. I can honestly say that. I've never been happier, and he is just the cream of the crop, good, thoroughly good man. As a matter of fact, let me tell you how wonderfully accommodating he is. I have 2 nephews going in the mission field today.
Wow.
I have one going to the Provo MTC this afternoon at 2:30, and I have a second nephew starting home MTC today in Denver, Colorado. He has come with me to both of their farewells. He came with me to my parents' missionary homecoming, and he's just a wonderful man. Even though he's not religious himself, he's all about family and love and support. Anyway, I have another story I want to share with you about my home ward. I was going to, as you know, Michael did not grow up LDS. And when we first started dating, my parents were serving their mission they were in Bedford, Virginia for their second mission. Their first mission was in Fort Wayne, Indiana. Their second one was in Bedford, Virginia. And when Michael found out I was raised LDS, he asked me one day, the only thing he knew about Mormons and homosexuals was, quote, "Don't Mormons hate gays," is what he said to me. And my first response to him was, no, they don't. But doctrinally, I think a gay lifestyle and the LDS Church's doctrine aren't congruent. That's the exact verbiage I used. They're not so congruent. And he said, okay. Well, one day we were driving to my brother's house in Springville from downtown Salt Lake. It's about a 40-minute drive. And I talk to my parents every day. I have for years. And my parents from their mission called me, and I was in my Tacoma with my boyfriend driving, and they had not talked to Michael yet. We'd been dating maybe 2 months at this time, or a month and a half, and they had not talked to him before. My mom had Facebook stalked him, but they had never talked to him personally. Well, it was on Bluetooth in my truck, and my dad gets on, and my parents, both of them, and they're talking. And my dad is a big family historian, and my last name Bott is German. As a matter of fact, Bott is a direct line from Germany. And my great-grandfather, Carl Christian Bott, came to the United States from Germany for the church. He was baptized and he wanted to move to Utah. Well, he came anyway. So my dad called, and Michael is a professional ballet dancer. And he now teaches at Ballet West, but he used to professionally dance. And he lived in Germany for 6 years. And so he and my dad started talking German and like words in German. He was like, "What does this mean? What does this mean?" And they talked the whole way down to my brother's house. And my mom and I really actually couldn't get in a word in. But my dad and Michael were talking all this stuff about Germany. And when we get to my brother's house, and I'm like, "We got to go, Dad. I'm sorry. They have dinner ready for us. We got to go in there." And my dad said, "Okay." And my dad said, "I love you guys."
Wow.
And we got off the phone, and Michael said, "Oh, that was so sweet of your dad to say he loves me as well as you. He loves you guys." And I looked at him and I said, "See, Mormons don't hate gays. My parents are as LDS as you can be, but they also love their son, and they want me to be happy." Well, fast forward a few months, my parents get off their mission. It's a homecoming, their homecoming, and I'm nervous to go to my home ward with my boyfriend, because everyone in the ward knows I'm gay. And so when I walk in with a guy, it's not my friend or my roommate. It's definitely someone of romantic interest. And we get to the Castle First Ward. I'll never forget. We walk in, and Michael sticks out. He's 6'3". He's very fit. He has an earring in his left ear. He just doesn't look like a member of the ward, in other words. And he comes walking in, and people just flock us, around us, and they start talking to us. And I will never forget, Michael was talking to a lady a guy in our ward, and his wife was talking to me, and she looks at me and she said, "Seth, who is this handsome man?" And I said, "Oh, his name's Michael. We're dating." And she looked at me and she said, "Seth, are you happy?" I said, "I am." And she said, "Good. That's all that matters." I remember she said that to me, and I was just like, "That's so sweet." And so Michael and I went and sat down. My parents gave fantastic talks. My parents asked me to play an organ solo, so I did an arrangement of "I Know My Redeemer Lives." Michael doesn't know that hymn, but I sat down and he had tears in his eyes, and he said, "You are so expressive with the way you play." He doesn't know the lyrics. He doesn't know anything about it. He just knew how he felt when he was listening to it. And he knows how he feels when he hears my parents talk about their mission. And at the end of that, the closing hymn was "As I Have Loved You." I've never liked that hymn. I like the lyrics. I never liked the music because it's a little boring for me. But that's okay. That day, we sang that hymn, and I started crying because of the way we were treated in the Castle First Ward. And the hymn is, "By this shall men know ye are my disciples, if you have love one to another." Guess what? It's easy to love people in your echo chamber. It's easy to love people who believe exactly like you do. But these people were so nice to us. And as we sang that, I was like, these people are true disciples. And I remember we're walking out, and a lot of people were talking to us, and they just wanted to come and wanted to meet who I had with me. And then we went outside, and I looked at Michael again, and I said, "See, Michael, Mormons don't hate gays." And, that's just kind of been something that it's been very special to me, and I know that could have gone the other way. Maybe there are people that were annoyed that 2 gays were here. I don't know, but that's a narrative I cannot control. And again, I have to remember the hymn, "By this shall men know ye are my disciples, if ye have love one to another." So I, every year, post a pride post, and in that pride post, I always say something like, "I don't care what your religious background is or your political affiliations or whatever. If you have respect for me, if I have respect for you, and I'm begging for respect as a gay man, I need to give it as well. I can't just say I need respect, I need love, if I'm not going to give it to people who are different than me." And so that's something that's very important to me, is mutual respect. And if I'm begging for it, I have to give it. And even if people believe or act differently than me, if they're nice to me, that's all I care about. I don't care what your credentials are. I don't care about your background or anything. If you're nice, you're a nice person. And that's, I think, goes a long ways. So that's basically my story in a nutshell. There's a lot of nuances and details, but I only had an hour to tell it, or 48 minutes, but that's basically it.
Thank you, Seth.
You're welcome.
You've brought tears to my eyes a couple times.
Thank you.
Not only the content is really moving, but your ability to tell a story is exceptional. You have a gift of communication, obviously a gift of music, but you have a gift of oral communication, and you don't rush things, and you are a gifted communicator. This is just one of the best podcasts we've done, and I keep saying that, and I'm just so moved. Here's some things I wrote down, listeners. I kind of go back and things that really popped out to me. I just loved where you started. I'm respectful of all paths. I'm respectful of celibate, LGBTQ Latter-day Saints. I'm respectful of mixed orientation marriage. I'm respectful of same-sex marriage. And it's easy for me as an ally to do that because I don't have a personal story. It takes a little more emotional maturity to do that, and to honor each other's pasts. And I love the way you role model that for fellow LGBTQ folk and for the rest of us as allies. So that was just wonderful.
And I must say, Richard, that isn't something that just happened overnight. That's something that's happened over years. And let me tell you, we're all trying to find happiness. That's the thing. We're all trying to find happiness. And so we just have to remember that.
This dream of becoming a Tabernacle choir organist, the more I learn about you and your talents and your education, and I just think if you were straight, that would have happened. I would guess you would be a Tabernacle organist now, given your skill level and your desire. And I'm thinking of your 14-year-old self seeing that Tabernacle organ. I think I saw that at 14 with all the foot pedals and all the different keyboards, and that just gave me a big headache. For you, it just gave you vision, and you just went all in. So I just want to validate how complicated your road is and how much you've sacrificed. One father with a couple gay sons called it the double bind. He said his sons they're gay, they wanted companionship. They just wanted to share their life with somebody. And they wanted to follow, and you were in this double bind where you wanted to become a Tabernacle organist, and you are certainly qualified to do that, and I believe would be doing that if you were straight, but you also wanted to just share your life with somebody, and men are that they might have joy, and I just acknowledge, I'm not in that double bind. I never had to do those trade-offs, and even though you've navigated that with such it's just remarkable that you've done that. And I just want to acknowledge just the cost that you're not able to have that dream. And I just want to sit with you a little bit and just not brush that over, Seth, and say, I'm sorry that dream never happened.
And this is something that I miss this in my story, but since you're saying this, I remember being in the temple the first time. I'd never said out loud to anybody that I was gay, but the first time I went through the temple when I was preparing for my mission, when we were covenanting to live the law of consecration, I told God, if you take this from me, I will live the law of consecration, just like the rest of these folks will in this room. But I will do more, and that I will be employed in your church as a Tabernacle organist. But of course, it didn't work out that way. And the older I got, the more, I always use the word intense, the more real my same-sex attraction became, because before my mission, I had a girlfriend. I could sweep that under the rug because I'm going on mission. And I came back from my mission. I had a girlfriend in my home area. It's okay. I'm going to BYU in the fall. That's probably going to come to an end. Then with all these, I always tried to look for a way out with these relationships. And then once everyone's getting married and people are like, why is Seth not married? It was become harder. And I'm like, you know what? I need to live my true life. And, and with all due respect, something for me that was hard is that if someone is enjoying intimacy or companionship and they tell me that I need to live a celibate life and or something else, I just have a hard time taking that to heart, because you have a companion. All of us want that. I really think that.
For sure. And I remember being a YSA bishop when I first stepped in this space and listening to these gay men tell me about being gay. And gosh, I remember driving home and that reality came to my life that I'm inviting them to be celibate so they can fully participate in the church. And I'm going to go home to my wife and she's going to probably have something prepared for me and we can share our experiences together. And I think listeners, I sort of, just made this all about sexual behavior too. I just thought, well, two gay people, this is all about sex. And it's not. My marriage is not all about sex, a straight marriage, and your marriage isn't all about sexual intimacy. It's about sharing your life together. And I think somehow we've reduced it to that. And it's not, it's,
Yeah.
it's demeaning. I don't know what the right word is. I'm uncomfortable with that. And my wife and I have just gone through surgeries in our mid 60s and dressed each other for the first time. And I actually thought of my celibate gay friends that don't have the chance and are making this really big sacrifice that just don't have the companionship. And it brought us even closer. It was this tender, beautiful moment, kind of the beginning of the last chapters of our life in our we hope they're about 30 years, but it's the beginning of a new chapter and I'm so grateful I have a companion like you do to share my life with and all the things that connect us, romantic intimacy, intellectual intimacy, emotional intimacy. And I'm glad you have Michael to share your life with, but I recognize you faced a cost that I never faced, and you had dreams that never became a reality because of this, something you can't control as far as your sexual orientation. You could feel called to be celibate. Listeners, I think forced celibacy is really hard. I think there's some Latter-day Saints out there that are really called to be celibate, and they feel a deep purpose in that and sort of a divine calling in that. And those are two different versions of celibacy. But forced celibacy can be really emotionally devastating and can lead to increased suicidal ideation. So,
Yeah.
mm,
And the thing is that the reason why I say that I respect the paths people do is because I know what I know within me, and I can look if there's a judgment day, and if we are standing before Jesus Christ someday, I will look at him in the eyes and I will say, I am taking the path that I feel like has been the most healthy and fulfilling and happy for me. Meanwhile, at the same time, being respectful of people that have chosen to do something else. And I'm not out here to throw sticks or anything about the church. It wasn't for me as a full active participating member, but I still have part in it through my music. So.
and just respect for having the ability to do that and work through maybe pain and anger and get to this stage. We've done a podcast that's going to release Around You by Tucker Boyle, and he talks about stages of faith. He uses musical terms. Melody is where we're all kind of the same. We're all singing the same. And he talks about dissonance. And then he talks about harmony, where he is in his faith journey. He's in the church. He's an institute teacher, but he's gone through a faith crisis, a faith transition. And he talks like you do, is just very respectful. And actually, the beauty of the harmony is kind of what's happening in your family. Your family, I'm projecting on your family, which isn't maybe a good idea, but maybe at one point the Bott family was all melody when you were younger and you were all kind of on the same path. And you've had to work through that.
Sure.
But now you're in a stage of harmony. And it's a place that is a beautiful place to be. And so here you are, bringing Michael to Castledale Ward in Emery County, if I've got the facts right, for your parents' homecoming. And you walk in there, and it's just this beautiful taste of Zion.
Yes.
And you perform, and Michael's there, and you have anxiety walking back into your home ward because now you know they're gay if you're showing up with your boyfriend. And I wrote down this woman who came up to you, and I think your visual is kind of, she put her hands around on your cheeks and says, "Are you happy, Seth?" And you said yes, and said, "That's all that matters." And that isn't quite, I've wondered if that's what our heavenly parents are going to say to us in the next life in Christ. And that's not quite our doctrine exactly, but maybe they're going to leave a lot of the judgment up to us in our life. And it's all, and I just am not judgmental to people like you, Seth. I don't look at you on a different path than me. I don't look at me earmarked for a different kingdom than you are. I just think you're doing the best on your journey with integrity, confidence, faith, and navigating really complex stuff where there was no owner's manual for you growing up in just a really thoughtful way. So I just don't worry about you in the next life.
Thanks.
The God that I love loves you and loves Michael and recognizes the complexity of the road and wants all of us back. And that's the way I leave it. And I want to be like the woman in your ward that just put her arms around you and said, "Are you happy? That's all that matters."
Thank you.
Your story about your dad and his faith and their missions and his personal revelation about you in that prayer and this line, there is nothing wrong with Seth. What is wrong and what needs to change is sort of my journey to understand gay people. And then he brought to remembrance, to use your term, which is a scripture term, just sort of the journey I've been on, all the things I said about queer people, gay people, the jokes that I thought were okay in Elders Quorum or growing up. And you sort of get this like, whoa, that's not cool.
Yeah.
But I love this conversation that your dad and your mom are having with you and Michael and the German language that bonds you together. And then you just continue to frame this that Mormons don't hate gays because of these experiences. That's brought tears to my eyes. Just this beautiful family that you have, Seth. And
I have a great family.
But I think you're the real hero here. I don't want to elevate you above your family members because you don't want me to do that. But Seth, you have navigated a road with no owner's manual. There's not a lot of people that have gone before you. You could say, this is how I do this. I could be a Tabernacle choir organist. I'm gay. I'm trying to just do everything I can, including giving it all on the altar of the temple to be straight and just not having that happen. Feeling your Beth Pass as companionship and still just not in a space of burn it all down. There's a real pain that comes sometimes that's probably been part of your journey, and that leads to anger, and that can lead to burn it all down. They all should leave. The church should just blow up. But you may have had some moments like that, but you're in this very mature, respectful place.
Thank you.
It makes me want to do better, to be the bridge builder you are. You role model some of that stuff I wish you could give in general conference. It was a great, just how to love people and support people. I also thought of your 11-year relationship that ended. And some people have a term that's sort of private grief. So if you're, because you're closeted perhaps, or because some might think it's actually a good thing this relationship ended, we don't sometimes grieve with you. And I want to go back and just grieve with you. I didn't know you then, but I think in the past I might have skipped over your grief because you were in a same-sex relationship which is not consistent with the teachings of our church. And now if I knew you now, I'd say, wow, you've just gone through one of the hardest things that I can imagine going through. Being with someone for 11 years, it's like a divorce. It's emotionally just, from what I understand, and I just would want to sit with you and not treat you any different than somebody in a straight relationship that just ended after 11 years.
Yeah.
So any thought, I don't know, I'm kind of talking now, anything you want to circle back to?
That's actually a very good point, Richard, because, I know if any of my siblings, actually I have a sibling that has gone through a breakup, and I know the grief that it's associated with that and the horrible things he went through with his kids and, the navigating of that. I don't have kids, but my ex and I, we both had to grieve. We had a house together. We had a life together. We are co-parenting a dog. I have my dog. We have our dog here every other week. We have joint custody. But, and I think he and I have had to realize we weren't meant for each other, as hard as that seemed. Of course, there are things that happened on my side and on his side that didn't make the relationship succeed. And I've learned from those mistakes. And he's in a new relationship and I'm in a new relationship. And we both would agree it's a healthier space for both of us. There's one thing I wanted to circle around about missions, that my brother Daniel my oldest brother, who's a bishop, pointed out to me this weekend. He said this to me, and it was so sweet. So we were in Denver this weekend for my nephew's missionary farewell that with my brother that lives out there. He has 5 beautiful kids and a beautiful wife. My brother Daniel said to me, and it really resonated with me. He came up to me and he said, because Daniel's son is the one I told you is going into the Provo MTC today. He said, the 4 of us in my family who went, my 4 brothers and I, my 3 brothers and me, the 4 of us that went on missions. We all have maybe walked a different path after our missions. And I'm not saying my path's bad. It's the right path for me. And I'm not saying anyone else's path's bad. It's the right path for them. Our paths might be different, but none of us regret going on a mission. None of us speak ill of our mission. We're grateful for the lessons we learned there, and we're grateful for the life lessons we learned, and also maybe a relationship we have learned to have with God that might be a little bit different than the other ones, but we don't regret going on mission. And he told me that, and I thought that was so sweet. And I shared that with his boy last night when I said goodbye to him before he entered MTC today, that missions we're grateful for that. So that's just one other thing I wanted to say.
I love that. And I love that you're involved. Some families are worried their gay siblings might influence younger people to be gay. And I hope we're past that
I hope so too.
Proximity to gay people conversion therapy didn't work. So
yeah, why would the opposite work? Exactly.
That's just a fear-based thing. And so one of the subnotes I'm getting from your family is they're wanting you around the family and including your nieces and nephews, and aren't worried you're going to somehow influence, but actually you help them and support them and have a conversation with an outgoing missionary from the gay uncle that's probably super helpful. So that's just awesome.
Thank you. My sister said to me a few years ago, and it was so sweet and so sincere. She said, Seth, I think your coming out has brought us closer as a family. She said that. And I don't know exactly how, but I know we're close, and I know we love each other fiercely. I do know that. So
I believe that. And I love that you went out with your sister. Was the first one you went out to. I share this Apollo 13 analogy every now and then, maybe every 10 podcasts, but Apollo 13 is this, mission that's going to the moon, and then it all changes. They're just trying to keep these astronauts alive, and it's really grim. And maybe that's how your family felt at some point. Maybe that's how you felt at some point. You're all not going to be in the temple, and that experience of having all your children in the temple was sort of back to the melody stage. And now the reality is that's not going to be happening. But Gene Kratz, the Houston commander, in the darkest moments he said to the team when they were really down, he said, this is going to be our finest hour. And it was Apollo's finest hour when they successfully brought those missionaries, those astronauts.
Yeah.
And in some way, this has been the Bott's family finest hour as the blessing of what you've talked about is where your sister said, we're all closer together. I think the ability to be vulnerable and talk vulnerably and be open and honest and not pretending that everything's just perfect is somehow improves family cultures. And so credit to all, if any of the Bott family is listening, siblings, in-laws, parents, credit to all of you for your love of Seth and just supporting your son, your brother, your friend, and the man he is, and that these beautiful God-given talents that he has of music and leadership and kindness and teaching and the work he's done, are blessing our community and beyond, multiple communities. And you're kind of the goat of, that's a positive term, listeners, that my kids tell me, of music and just being a bridge builder and role modeling, being respectful. And I just love that you continue to be involved in our LDS community. We have lots of people that aren't members of our church often performing musically. And so why would we teach Seth any differently, or worse than somebody like that? We just recognize there's good in the music front and all fronts from multiple sources. So I love that your music friends continue to use your talents to bless us, because you bless us and it's wonderful.
Thank you.
And my advice for those of you who aren't regular listeners is to do what Seth has done. If I'm meeting with a younger LGBTQ person, I just say, become your best self, figure out, start making these decisions about what fork in the road is going to work for you. Celibacy, mixed orientation marriage, or same-sex marriage. Don't make that out of anger or reaction to a church talk or a comment from a friend. Self-determine when you're your personal best and kind of write your own story. And hopefully we'll all just walk with you as you write your own story and leave any judgment up to our Savior and his perfect understanding, and just love people where they are and recognize the complexities in their lives. So you're doing a great job of that, Seth, and it helps younger people.
Thank you.
I wanted to read a quote, listeners, if you can. This is a quote from Brene Brown. When you were talking about being celibate and how that wasn't going to work for you, Brene Brown, she defines that. She gives a term for that: psychological isolation. We believe the most terrifying and destructive feeling a person can experience is physiological isolation. It's not the same as being alone. It's a feeling that one is locked out of the possibility of human connection and powerless to change the situation. And that can she goes on, that's the end of her quote, to say that can lead to, increased suicidalation. So that kind of helped me understand what a gay or lesbian teenager may feel in our church that wants to fully participate in the church, wants to be the Tabernacle Organist or whatever their dreams are, but the requirement to be celibate, unless they feel a mixed orientation marriage can work, can just be overwhelming. And it's different than just being alone, as you know, Seth, and it's locked out of the possibility for the rest of your life from companionship.
Yeah. And that's why I never agreed with the statement. We expect gay people to do the same thing as single people, and that is to be celibate. No, you're putting the single people, we're in singles wards. We're doing these activities to promote dating. So I have felt that, and so that's come up. I'm like, I want to have a relationship.
And I said that. I'm like your father, brought to a remembrance of the things I've said. And I've said that. I said that as a YSA bishop. And then somebody like you kind of helped me understand that a single straight person still has hope. They can pray every night. They can find somebody. Their sexual orientation lines up with their hopes and the church teaching. So yeah, neither of us want to minimize the difficulty of being single in the church, but single and straight is different than single and gay, because you're sort of,
there's hope.
You're sort of kind of in emotional lockdown, not to fall in love with a dude if you're going to stay in the church. Yeah. And if you're straight and single, my wife and her in a YSA ward right now as a ministering couple. And so we were reminded of the journey the YSAs take. As a side note, the bishop of our YSA ward is terrific. He has never talked about marriage over the pulpit. And he said over the pulpit, I'm never going to talk about that subject. It's all about coming unto Christ and your personal relationship.
I love that.
And so our culture is, and I love that too, because this is one of the older YSA wards. They've divided them in Utah to a younger and older. So this is like 26 to 35. And everybody there has heard 1,000 talks about getting married and probably would like to be married. And if they, this, just it could be triggering even for straight single people to be told about marriage, or even the bishop to get up and talk about his wife and his family. And sort of he has something, he's not saying that, but it sort of communicates that I don't have that. I'd love to have that. But now church is triggering for me because I'm just reminded I'm single. So he's been terrific.
Yes. That's great.
And I wish he could speak in general conference and invite us all to do that. I wish you could speak in general conference, Seth, because you have much good to give our team.
I think I'd rather be up on the organ, but that's okay.
So, listeners, that's about all I have. But I think of the Gathering of Israel. Your two nephews we talk about their work as the Gathering of Israel and finding people just like you did on your mission in California, to find people that want to hear our restored doctrine. But I think the Gathering of Israel is also it's also what we need to do to gather LGBTQ Latter-day Saints. They have been scattered with the things I've said, your father has said. I don't want to pick on your father, but I just resonate with him because we're probably in the same age group and grew up in the same time. Mm-hmm. And I've been guilty of scattering our own people. You're part of you're Israel, Seth. You're part of our people. You've served a mission. You've paid tithing. You've given so much to the church, and you still give to the church with your beautiful musical contributions. And so I hope we do what the Castledale First Ward, is that what the number?
Yep. Castledale First Ward. Yep.
So I just hope we can be like the Castledale First Ward, and no one sold out our doctrine to do what they did for you and Michael. No one went rogue. No one sort of went off script. They just did what Jesus invites us to do. And the gathering that you and Michael felt and the belonging you felt, and they didn't just sort of put you on the back row. They had you perform.
Yeah.
You were part of the program.
Thank you.
And so anyway, I just love the Castledale First Ward and what happened there. But thanks, Seth. You made this all possible because of just your spiritual maturity, your emotional maturity, your ability to navigate really complex spaces. So you're just really good man. And thank you for being on the podcast.
My pleasure. Thank you, Richard.
Anything else in closing that comes to your mind? I'm done. I promise.
No, I think I said everything that needs to be said.
Okay. Well, listeners, share this podcast with others. Seth's story opens hearts, changes minds, and brings us together as the same family. So this is Seth Bott and Richard Osler signing off from another episode of Listen, Learn, and Love.